being mindful about how we are talking about our voice, how we are self-identifying, how we are describing ourselves to others. I hear so often, I can't sing, I have a terrible singing voice. And this is a healthy challenge for myself working in this field, because it always stirs a response in me that is kind of curious and wants to know more of, like, oh, that's really interesting. Where does that come from, or what makes you say that? And obviously, context dependent. If this is in a kind of formal, safe, supported setting, that conversation would be held differently to a kind of an anecdotal chat or passing in the street, and titrating that accordingly, maybe breaking the ice a bit with humour, if it feels like that is possible to do, but also being aware that a statement like that is a defense. It is a way of shutting down the conversation, and it's a kind of definitive statement, which is why it's a really interesting one in terms of belief work, because that is the sort of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And if we kind of dig underneath and kind of try to establish how this outward presentation of a statement has kind of come to be so integrated that it just rolls off the tongue as easily as saying, hello, my name is, that can be a really interesting avenue to explore some work around, okay, is that even my belief? Is this something that I have come to associate with because I have experienced shutdown, or I have experienced shame for speaking out or for expressing myself creatively? Or has there been an experience where someone in my life has actually said to me, you can't, or you shouldn't, or you sound like XYZ, and then ascribed a kind of aesthetic value judgment onto our self-expression? And perhaps we were expressing for the love, the joy, the appreciation of doing that, rather than that coming from a kind of performative place of trying to meet a specific standard or to emulate someone else's style. So it is a kind of it's territory to be careful around, because everyone has a unique story and different life experiences, and some of those may be quite vulnerable. So kind of being aware of that, but also the challenge that kind of can be in response to that is sometimes the challenge that is needed to bring awareness and attention to the fact that someone is actually creating a statement which is self-deprecating, which is already shutting themselves down just from the get-go. There's already a diminishing quality there that is like, oh, not me, not my voice, not my expression. And we can take this further, like, not my ideas, not my presence, not my visibility, not my opinion. So this is why that kind of sticks out for me so much as a kind of turn of phrase, because who's to say, you know, what is possible with the right support, the right tools, a space where exploration can feel safe to begin the process of meeting those parts that are kind of maybe going to create discomfort and create confrontation. Like, that's a reality of engaging with anything that is inviting a kind of challenge here, a challenge to a belief system, or a challenge to what it is actually possible to achieve or to even let go of. That if we have been told something repeatedly or had experiences repeatedly that have kind of reinforced a kind of negative idea around an aspect of our expression, then of course it's going to feel highly confrontational and quite charged and exposing and vulnerable to venture into this work. And the reality also being that the process of engaging with that is not necessarily going to be easy. There will be obstacles to overcome, absolutely, but that is true of any personal development practice. And I would say that just because that is a current template, a current frame of reference, a current lived experience that we are maybe in a feedback loop with, where that idea is actually being reinforced by experiences that kind of consolidate and compound that, because we are actually feeding into and perpetuating behaviors that don't support a softening of this or a resolution or kind of healing aspect of this, because we continue then to make adjustments and modulations to our behavior and our expression, which are a kind of an evidencing of and a manifestation of, yeah, well, if I'm not a person that has a good voice or a strong voice or a confident voice, and that is a message that we are continually repeating, reinforcing, and telling other people, we are giving ourselves cues and anchor points all the time that are actually encouraging us to respond in a way that actually exhibits these qualities, exhibits the kind of characteristics and behavior of. So we're kind of in that deepening groove of perpetuating this idea and this belief actually through our actions. And I think that's also another reason why it can be really challenging to take the first steps, particularly around actually moving from a place of not vocalizing or holding back to actually using the voice and letting the voice come out, because there have maybe been patterns around speech that are kind of functional, or that we can find workarounds with and kind of coping mechanisms and strategies, but then the actual performative act of singing or, sustaining notes for any period of time is kind of far more revealing as to potential unhelpful patterns there, relating to kind of holding and tension, or that actually, because we are not in that space, we are actually working with that and getting to a point where the feelings of discomfort that arise and the activation that's stimulated with that doesn't get a chance to reach that resolution point of like getting through the discomfort and onto the other side of that, which is actually the positive feelings of like, oh, I've done something and I've released some energy and I've actually you know shifted something within me, or I've managed to actually move all the way from feeling kind of shut down and uncommunicative, and moved through the agitation piece then of how that is actually bringing up resistance, and then the kind of activation of like, I don't like this and I don't want to be in this experience, and the challenge that comes with that, to the kind of other side of the spectrum, which is, oh, actually, that there's something happening here that's shifting me into a space of feeling that there's a kind of positive energy loop here. I'm actually feeling energized by this, and I'm discovering that there's actually much more depth and range to my voice than I've allowed myself to previously explore or meet even. And the fact that you're doing that in a space where someone is witnessing you and holding space for you and encouraging you to move through the blocks with the knowledge that continuing will get you to this eventual point of, oh, that person's heard me and acknowledged me and seen me and understood me, and now I'm finding that I'm able to connect with them in a kind of a deeper way, a more meaningful way, because they have actually received an exchange of energy. I've actually allowed there to be a fully realized expression of that energy from my internal landscape to the external space, and the person that's holding the space hasn't shut me down or hasn't criticized me or hasn't told me that what I've expressed or sounded is bad or wrong, or that it sounds terrible. And the distinction here of where we create a space that is focused around trying to achieve something specific vocally that actually does involve there being an element of someone else stepping into a role of asking permission if it is okay to provide feedback and if it's okay to actually offer constructive criticism and to suggest and provide alternative exercises or tools to make micro adjustments for that person's benefit of actually receiving more feedback, receiving more information that will allow them to experience a kind of a wider spectrum of possibility and frequency technically, which is going to further support and encourage a kind of deeper interpersonal exploration of feeling that it's okay to get it wrong, and for that to be seen and witnessed by someone else, but then for there to be a kind of an encouragement that comes with that, of like the person that is facilitating that space understands, in fact, how difficult it is to make any sound in the first place and for that to be witnessed. The fact that that is the very thing that is highly uncomfortable, highly exposing, and therefore that the suggestions and adjustments and constructive pieces around a kind of vocal pedagogy point of view, that can't really land and that can't really support that individual in the first instance if they are not primed and ready and have given permission for that kind of input to be part of the story of how that session is going and flowing. Because it might take time, it might take a few sessions for somebody to get to that point where they're also feeling brave enough to try and experiment and implement these additional tools that you're offering, and for that to be interpreted as kind of supportive and helpful rather than a kind of parallel narrative running of, oh, they're suggesting that because I'm terrible and this sounds awful and they've heard so many voices before and my one is just the worst. And, you know, because there's actually so much belief work to shift around dissolving and softening this previously held piece of, I sound bad, my voice is rubbish, I can't sing. And that is a massive one that I do encounter with lots of different people from all different walks of life. So it is really, really common, and it's okay. You know, I think there's a kind of fear and anxiety around bringing this discussion to the table because it might be the case that this is a kind of a surface level presentation of something that is connected to a much more complex, long and winding strand of kind of therapeutic intervention or kind of psychoeducation or other forms of support and mental health support that are possibly necessary. So rather than shying away from it, I think it's important to invite a space to kind of offer this challenge of, okay, like, where does that come from, and let's explore it. Because you might not be the individual that brings the realization of that part of that person's journey to a kind of neat conclusion, but you can certainly be a facilitator and a signposter and a waymarker to other tools and resources that can support this kind of deeper strand of development, which I think is so worth to do.